Bitter me.
Bitter me.
Bitter me.
Bitter me.
It's bitter me. Hopefully. Yes, you came back for a second episode. God, this makes me so happy. I really appreciate you. This is Better Me. Hopefully. And it's a podcast about discovering what is actually good for us in the health world and what's just an absolute waste of our time and money. This episode, we're going to be talking about Ozempic. Now, you've probably heard the word. I had absolutely no idea what it actually entailed. I just knew that a lot of celebrities were using Ozempic to have a fast shred of weight loss. I knew that it was starting to make people have an even more unrealistic body standard. And I also knew that it was a miracle drug for people that actually needed Ozempic. So I wanted to find out the good, the bad, the ugly, and whether or not it was as scary as it kind of seems to be. So what I did was I jumped on Zoom after stalking down Johann Hari. Now, Johann Hari is the author of a book called The Magic Pill, and he has been on Ozempic, he has studied it, he has got all of the gossip about it. So I thought he was the perfect person to speak to about it.
So this is a really big deal. This isn't a fad. This isn't a craze. This is a huge scientific breakthrough that is going to affect all our lives.
When we were talking about doing this episode, we thought that it was really important to get a Kiwi perspective as well. So I talked to a bunch of women here in New Zealand that have taken drugs similar to Ozempic, but also I was so appreciative of my friend Katie, who took it for a completely different reason.
My doctor suggested it to me as a way to help my polycystic ovary syndrome. Admitting that I was on it could really make people have opinions about things. Because of this whole industry of weight loss, it does make you go, do I want to be open about that?
Better Me, hopefully, with Sharon Casey.
Welcome to Better Me, hopefully, the amazing Johann Hari. Did this just pop up overnight? Because where has it come from?
I'll never forget the moment I first learned about the existence of Ozempic. It was that moment when the world was opening up again after COVID. And I got invited to a party. And this party was thrown by an Oscar-winning actor. I'm not saying that just to name drop. It is relevant. And in the Uber on the way there, I was feeling a bit self-conscious because I was quite fat at the start of the pandemic and I gained a lot of weight during lockdown like loads of people. And then suddenly I thought, oh, wait a minute. Almost everyone I know gained weight during lockdown. This is going to be fascinating. I'm going to see a load of Hollywood stars with a bunch of podge on them, right? And I arrived and I started walking around and it was the weirdest thing. It's not just that no one had gained weight. Everyone was gaunt. Everyone looked like their own Snapchat filter. They were like cleaner and clearer and sharper. It was just bizarre. And I bumped into a friend of mine on the dance floor. I said to her, wow, looks like everyone really did take up Pilates during lockdown. And she just laughed at me, right? And I didn't know why she was laughing. And she pulled up on her phone an Ozempic pen. So I learned in the next few days that there's been this incredible medical breakthrough. As one of the scientists who developed Ozempic put it to me, we've cracked the code of what regulates human appetite. And as a result, we now have a drug that causes incredible levels of weight loss. If you take Ozempic or Wegovy, you lose on average 15% of your body weight in a year. If you take Mounjaro, which is the next in this class of drugs, you lose 21% of your body weight on average. And if you take Triple G, which will be available next year, you lose on average 24% of your body weight, just below bariatric surgery. So this is like a staggering change. And the moment I learned about it, I immediately felt two totally contradictory things. The first thing I thought was, well, this could save my life, right? I was about to turn 45. That's the age my granddad was when he died of a heart attack. Loads of the men in my family are obese and die of heart attacks. My dad had terrible heart problems that didn't kill him. My uncle died of a heart attack. And I just thought, well, I knew that obesity sadly causes or makes worse over 200 known diseases or complications. I thought, wow, if we've got a drug that can reverse or massively reduce obesity, that's going to be a big deal. But I also thought, well, wait a minute, this sounds way too good to be true. Can you really get all these benefits without a cost? What will it mean for body positivity? What will it mean for eating disorders? Like, I had loads of concerns. So for my Magic Pill, I went on this big journey all over the world, from Iceland to Minneapolis to Japan, to interview the leading experts in the world on these drugs, the biggest defenders, the biggest critics. I learned that the truth is, it's a pretty complicated picture. There are extraordinary benefits to these drugs and there are disturbing risks to these drugs, and everyone's going to have to weigh them for themselves.
Wow. So you ended up taking Ozempic. You lost, was it 20 kilos? So like 3 stone?
So, unlike you barbaric colonials, I don't do kilos, so I'm afraid I can't do that. It's 42 pounds or 3 stone, but you'll have to do the kilos yourself. I have a complete mental block on kilograms, right?
So you went on Ozempic. Once you go on something like this, are you on it forever, or is it something that you do for a period of time and then once you've had the weight loss, that's when you have to start kind of maintaining it yourself?
Yeah, so this is one of the big debates. One of the weird things about these drugs is there's so many things we don't know. One of them is, do you have to take them forever? What the drug companies say is these drugs are like blood pressure medication or like statins. They work for as long as you take them, and when you stop taking them, you go back to how you were before. You regain the weight. And they've published a study that does seem to show that. Some other people anecdotally seem to be saying, well, I took the drugs to interrupt my eating patterns and change, and now I've stopped and I'm able to maintain a lower weight, but they seem to be quite a small minority. So it looks like this isn't a holiday fling, it's like a marriage. And it's like a marriage if you're a Mormon. You're in it for life, right? You can't get out.
So are you still, if you don't mind me asking, so you were taking
Sure.
it for like a year, are you continuing to take it now? Like, will you take it for the rest of your life?
So I had some significant drawbacks to the drugs, but I decided to continue taking them for reasons that I'll explain. But when you start taking them, it's really weird. The key mechanism of how the drugs works. If you ate something now, it doesn't matter what it is, after a little while, your pancreas will produce a hormone called GLP-1. And GLP-1 is part of your body's natural systems going, hey, you've had enough, stop eating. It's the brakes, basically.
Yeah.
Natural GLP-1 only stays in your system for a couple of minutes and then it's washed away. So what these drugs do is they inject you with an artificial copy of GLP-1. Instead of sticking around for a few minutes, it stays in your system for a whole week. So it has this really weird effect. Never forget, the second day after I took Ozempic, I went to a cafe just up the road that I used to go to every morning for breakfast. I'm so embarrassed to say, every morning I would order a massive chicken sandwich with loads of mayo, and I would wolf that down, and I would still want some crisps, right? That morning, I had like 3 or 4 mouthfuls, and I was just full. I didn't want any more. It was really strange. And that was basically how it was. From then on, you feel really full really quickly. So it's like kind of shutters come down your appetite. It's not like being on a diet. You're not hungry and denying yourself. You just don't want to eat because you feel really full really quickly. I realized until I had taken these drugs, I don't think I had ever really felt full, right? Partly because of the kind of food we eat. Processed and ultra-processed food undermines our ability to feel full. I can talk about that more. But for me, I lost an enormous amount of weight. There were all sorts of benefits. There were some significant downsides. But for me, the thing that really decided it, and obviously in the book I go through the risks of obesity, the risk of the drugs. People can weigh that for themselves, and different things, different risks apply to people differently. But for me, the thing that decided it is, if you take these drugs, you're 20% less likely to have a heart attack or stroke if you were obese at the start. And for me, I just thought, well, those benefits outweighed the risks.
So the benefits definitely outweighed the risks when it came to taking Ozempic for Johann, but he was taking it for weight loss, and he's still taking it now. But I really wanted to get a perspective from someone here in New Zealand, and I chatted to my friend Katie, who took it for a completely different reason.
My doctor suggested it to me as a way to help my polycystic ovary syndrome.
I didn't know that these drugs were used for that as well. So how long did you take it for?
I took it for about 6 months in total, and because the New Zealand brand is branded differently to the American brand, I didn't actually think that one were the same. I never went into it from a weight loss perspective. In fact, I was told that weight loss would be one of the things that would happen, but I tried not to think about that too much because I do live in a bigger body, but I try not to focus on weight and things like that. I just want to feel good.
Totally. And did you feel good when you were taking this medication? Because a lot of people, there's some side effects of depression, heightened anxiety, nausea, all that sort of stuff. Did you experience any of those?
Yes, 100%. So that's actually why I stopped taking it, because the whole point was I already feel lethargic and fatigued by my polycystic ovary syndrome. So I felt really tired and really sluggish. I just could not get over the fatigue. Like I could literally close my eyes and sit in a seat and go to sleep. Like I was just so zonked. And that was the opposite of what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this ain't working.
What do you think, as someone that has taken this drug, you would say to someone that didn't actually need it?
It's no joke. I think that there's a huge stigma around it because of the whole celebrity endorsement or, people using it that don't necessarily need to. But it's just another tool in the belt for people that do need it, like polycystic ovaries or diabetics. There's real reasons why people use it. And I think that because of the stigma, I was nervous to come and talk to you because admitting that I was on it could really make people have opinions about things. But, I know the reasons why I took it. and that's fine. But because of this whole industry of weight loss, it does make you go, do I want to be open about that?
I found it so interesting, and I wonder if you do as well, that there's this massive stigma that Katie was mentioning, even having people know that she was taking this drug to improve her health. But then on the flip side, there's people that are taking it when they don't actually need to. So I spoke to Johann about this and what the dangers are for people who don't have any reason at all to be on these drugs.
There's people who are overweight or obese who are taking these drugs to come down to a healthy weight. There are risks associated with that. There are some people who I think should do it and some people who shouldn't, but there's a strong case for it for many people. Then there's people who are a normal weight or healthy weight or indeed skinny who are taking it to be super skinny. And I want to be clear, women are made to feel like shit about their bodies no matter what they do. I don't judge anyone who's doing that. I understand where it comes from. But with a lot of love and compassion, I would urge people in that situation to not take the drugs because they're actually bringing on quite a lot of risk for themselves. And there's several reasons why. When you lose weight, you don't just lose fat mass, you also lose muscle mass. So muscle mass is the total amount of soft tissue in your body. And it's really important for things like getting out of a chair, climbing the stairs, movement, right? So muscle mass is the total amount of soft tissue in your body. It's absolutely essential for movement. And so when you lose a load of weight, you lose a load of muscle mass. And that's any form of weight loss, diet, Ozempic, whatever. And that's not a big deal in the short term, and it's not a big deal, if you're like 30, 40, 50. But it can cause a really big problem as you age. You naturally start to lose muscle mass anyway. You lose about 8% muscle mass a year every decade. If you're going into the aging process with very low muscle mass because you've made yourself super skinny using these drugs, that can cause horrendous problems as you age. So you're massively at risk of a condition called sarcopenia, which is where you have very low muscle mass and you just find it hard to do really basic things like get out of a chair, climb the stairs. So the danger is you'll get some aesthetic benefit now from being super skinny, but the danger is that you'll end up setting in train massive problems for you as you get older, a kind of time bomb of problems as you get older. So I would really, and that's just one of many risks actually. Wow. So I would really urge people to not do that.
I think it's a really important thing to say because I think you look at, I don't want to use her as an example because she hasn't said that she uses Ozempic, but, like Katy Perry's new promo photos, and a lot of people like Ozempic, or Kelly Clarkson, for example, for a long time said that she'd just been doing diet and exercise. And then she said, actually, I took a drug similar to Ozempic. And I think it's quite important that people are open about if they did take it, so it's not creating this like unrealistic body standard. But for people that are still just looking for that quick fix, what are the downsides of taking Ozempic? Like, what are the risks involved?
Well, there's 12 big risks. For me, the calculation was I've been obese almost all my adult life. I tried diet and exercise many times. There are some people for whom diet and exercise works, but it's a surprisingly small number of people. It's about 15% of people who diet and exercise keep the weight off 2 years down the line. So it's not nobody, but it's a very, very small number of people. I had to compare the risks of continuing to be obese against the risk of these drugs, right? So that's a difficult choice. The risks of obesity are sadly very severe. Obesity causes or makes worse over 200 known conditions. It's basically everything we fear, from dementia to cancer to heart disease to stroke to diabetes. They're all made much more likely by being obese. There's no guarantee, of course. Some people live to be 90 and obese and don't have those problems, but they make it much, much more likely. So you have to compare that risk to the risk of the drugs. The way I think of the drugs is they're a kind of trapdoor, right? They're a risky, rusty trapdoor, but if you're in a trap, you'll think about the trapdoor, right?
Yep.
I'll tell you the one that for me was the weirdest. I don't want to be clear. In addition to these risks, there's lots of side effects, common side effects. Almost everyone feels nauseous at first, and that goes away over time for most people, but not everyone. Things like that, but I'm not talking about side effects. So for the first 6 months I was taking the drugs, it was really weird, right? I was getting what I wanted. I was losing loads of weight. My neighbour's hot gardener hit on me.
Yeah.
My back pain went away. I mean, he was so hot, it was insane. Loads of good things happened, but I didn't actually feel better. If anything, I felt slightly worse. I was looking at the evidence that this is contested, but some scientists are concerned that some people might even become depressed or even suicidal taking these drugs. It wasn't that bad for me, but I did feel quite muted. I think, why would that be? And there's a big debate about why, but I think one of the reasons, and I wish I'd known about this in advance, is, I had a real epiphany about it. I was in Las Vegas and I was researching the murder of someone that I knew and really loved. It was very difficult, as you can imagine. I went to this branch of KFC that I'd been to 1,000 times. And I went in and I ordered what I would have ordered before I was taking Ozempic. I ordered a big KFC bucket, right? And I had one of the chicken drumsticks. And I suddenly realised, I looked at the bucket and thought, oh shit, I can't eat this, right? Because when you're on Ozempic, you can't overeat. Imagine I came to you after a massive Christmas dinner and said, great news, I've got you a KFC bucket, right?
Yeah.
You'd just be like, oh, take it away from me. That's how you feel really quickly on these drugs, right?
Wow.
And I remember very consciously thinking, oh, you're just going to have to feel bad then. So what these drugs do is they interrupt your eating patterns. That's obviously a good thing. That's why you lose so much weight. What that can do is bring to the surface some of the deep underlying psychological reasons why you ate all along. Only one of them is the obvious one, to like sustain our bodies. The rest is to comfort ourselves, all sorts of things, right? I couldn't do that on these drugs. I realized when I was quite young, I would eat to kind of calm myself down, to numb myself. And I couldn't do that when I was on these drugs. You can't. Now, again, that can be a good thing. Like, there's better ways for me to deal with my distress than KFC and Colonel Sanders, but that can be a difficult adjustment process for a lot of people.
Right now, we are joined by Ryan O'Connor, who is an optometrist at Specsavers, who are the amazing sponsors of our podcast. And I've got some questions for you, Ryan. What is a better solution for people who wear sunglasses over the top of their glasses? Because my husband does this when he drives. Like, isn't it going to be easier and more cost effective to get prescription lenses in his sunglasses? Like, help me out here.
Oh, it's a good look, Bryce. Not. Yeah, absolutely. It's completely simple to get your prescription put into prescription sunglasses, whether that's just as a tint, we've got a range of colours, or polarised. I don't know, is Bryce a keen fisherman?
Oh, he is a bit of a fisherman. He gives it a crack.
Yeah, so no, super simple to get your prescription put into prescription sunglasses.
So if I've already got existing sunglasses that I say didn't get from Specsavers, can I just take those glasses in and they'll put the right lenses inside them?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Wow.
We're able to do that. We're optometrists, so we do that.
God, you guys are so clever, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for popping in. Back to my gal Katie now. She's an extremely busy, talented and out-the-gate hairdresser, and she often doesn't have time to eat at the best of times. And even though her reasons for the drug weren't for weight loss, I wanted to know if there was an effect on her appetite and also her weight.
I definitely experienced nausea, so you don't really want to eat that much anyway, so I cannot eat for a long time. That being said, it made all of that easier. I definitely didn't feel as strong a need to eat, but it definitely didn't put me off anything. The reason why I took it was just for such a different outcome, and I did not get desired effects.
So the desired effects, you mean you didn't get the Ozempic shred like all the celebrities and stuff are getting at the moment?
No, and I'll be honest, I didn't watch my weight. Like, I was just kind of like, if I feel good, then I'm going to be really happy because I'm going to have more energy. But it was absolutely the opposite. And if I did have much weight loss, it wasn't enough that people were like stopping me in the street going, girl, what'd you do?
Blimmin' love that lady. And there's absolutely people like Katie here in New Zealand who are or have been taking a drug equivalent to Ozempic. They're few and far between, but Johann's got an interesting / scary prediction.
Don't underestimate, this isn't a fad, right? 47% of Americans want to take these drugs. 8 years from now, these drugs will be a daily pill, they'll be out of copyright, they'll cost $1 a day. I predict half of the population of New Zealand will be taking these drugs, given that more than 60% of Kiwis are overweight or obese. This is going to transform so much of our lives, for better and for worse. For people like me, people with heart disease in their family, it could be life-saving. For people with eating disorders, I think it could be deadly. In between, there'll be lots of people whose lives are changed in really complicated ways. So this is a really big deal. This isn't a fad. This isn't a craze. This is a huge scientific breakthrough that is going to affect all our lives. So I think before this revolution hits New Zealand, and do not underestimate, you will know a lot of people on these drugs very soon. Really stop and think about what this is going to mean for all of us, because it's going to have huge implications.
So on the back of that, because obviously like the stat in New Zealand for obesity is so high, do you think that getting things like Ozempic are too easy to get? Like, is it easy to just go in and be like, oh no, I definitely need it? Or is it, kind of down to the doctor if they just want to like hand it out? Or do you think there should be more kind of regulation around who actually gets given it?
We're in a really bad situation where often people who don't need it, like the Real Housewives of New Jersey, can get it really easily. And the people who do need it, like people with severe obesity or even people with type 2 diabetes, because the drug also treats that, can't get it. So I don't know enough about the situation in New Zealand, but I know the situation in the US and Britain. There's a lot of people I'm really excited about these drugs for, but I'm really, really worried about people with eating disorders. So anyone who's ever known anyone with an eating disorder, I'm sure you have, I have, knows that there's a conflict going on inside them. There's the part of them that wants to live and therefore wants to eat. And then there's the psychological part of them that, for very complicated reasons we all know about, wants to starve themselves, right? And what these drugs do, if you take them in a high enough dose, is just amputate your appetite. This is why people like Dr. Kimberly Dennis, one of the leading eating disorders experts in the United States, has said these drugs are rocket fuel for eating disorders, right?
Wow.
At the moment, like, I can see you on this Zoom thing we're on, right?
Yeah.
You are clearly not eligible for these drugs. You should not be given them unless you've got type 2 diabetes, right? You shouldn't be given them. Your BMI is clearly lower than 25, right?
Oh, thank you.
But I guarantee you that if you lived in Britain or the US, you could get a Zoom appointment tomorrow, you get a consultation with a doctor, and the drugs will be delivered to you the next day, right?
Wow, that's
Because
crazy.
Doctors are meant to check your BMI. But in practice on Zoom, how much are you doing that? And the doctors aren't even incentivized to do it. You know, a lot of them don't care, right? So, for example, I live half the year in the US, half the year in Britain. So I got them initially in Britain, and then I went to the US. By the time I was getting them in the US, I had lost so much weight, I was well below the BMI that you need to be to get the drugs. I went to get it in Las Vegas. No one said to me, well, you're not eligible, right? I mean, I could have told them I was already on it, but they didn't even ask. They didn't care, right?
Wow.
I mean, I don't think they are. They didn't care, right? So what a lot of the eating disorders experts are warning, and I think they're absolutely right, is we need to tightly regulate these drugs. You should only be able to get them in person through actually seeing a doctor. The doctor should actually check your BMI. If your BMI is lower than 27, unless you've got type 2 diabetes, you should not be given these drugs. If we don't do that, I fear that in addition to all the extraordinary benefits to these drugs for people like me, there will be like an opioid-like death toll of loads of young girls. Obviously, we know it is overwhelmingly young girls who get eating disorders. Some young boys and some older women, but it's mostly girls. A huge number of young girls who will be able to starve themselves to death with these drugs in a way they would not have been able to had the drugs not been invented. I'm really worried about it.
Out of interest, I chucked it out on Instagram to see if there was anyone that followed me that was open to share their experience with taking Ozempic or a similar drug that's available here in New Zealand, and they took it for weight loss. I was so incredibly grateful to the amazing wāhine that just shared their story so willingly with me. Now, some of them have used a voice changer. They wanted to share their story, but they also didn't want to be identified. So have a listen, because these are real life wāhine here in New Zealand sharing their story.
Honestly worth every penny. I was just in really bad habits, really bad eating. I put on so much weight that I was almost pre-diabetic. First few weeks, you're really, really nauseous. I struggled with nausea and had quite a bit of constipation. Then it kind of phased out. So yeah, really, really would recommend. If you're really struggling with your weight and you've tried heaps of stuff and nothing's working, I thought that this was really good in terms of just getting into way better habits, eating less, realising that I was just eating because I needed to fulfill or sustain energy versus eating for the sake of eating.
So I did it for about 3 months, $500 a month, which is a lot of money. Would never do it again. The side effects were horrendous, and I ended up having weight loss surgery last year and have lost 60 kilos. So I think it's not worth it. Headaches, nausea, mood swings was not good.
I had the first injectable dose, and the following day I honestly felt like I'd been hit by a bus. I was so freaking tired that the furthest I got was from my bed to the couch all day. The effects seemed to lessen a little bit by the time the following Thursday came around. I took the second dose about 9 o'clock in the morning, and by lunchtime I was an absolute freak show. My insides felt like concrete and I was just swelling up, but at the same time I was absolutely shitting like a demon. I rang my husband at work, I'm not a pussy, and I said to him, I feel like something's really not right here.
The first time I took it, I fainted. I think it was just a side effect or shock of actually doing it and injecting yourself. But after the initial fainting episode, I was fine then on, and I did lose quite a bit of weight. So I probably lost about 8 kilos. but near to the 3-month mark, I ended up in hospital with pancreatitis. They took me straight off in. The funny thing is, I literally gained back the 8 kilos in about 2.5 weeks.
My main thing that I really didn't like was the lack of want of food, which I guess is kind of what drives you to have Ozempic. It's actually quite tough to know that you need to eat but then not desire food, because I really like food.
That is such an important point, because for a lot of people, including myself, food is such a huge part of life, and it's part of people's culture, whether it's like cooking or having dinner with your friends and family. And so I asked Johann what he'd discovered in his research about how people that take this medication end up losing their pleasure in food.
I'm unusual. So a lot of people describe the experience you're describing. They describe when they take the drug, they lose their pleasure in food. In fact, one of the scientists who developed the drugs, Jens Jules Holst, has said in an interview with Wired magazine that just makes the drug untenable in the long term, because just pleasure in food is such a basic pleasure in life. I actually had the opposite experience. I had this funny, a while after starting to take the drug, I went for dinner with one of my best friends. And she said, it's always been a bit weird going out for dinner with you, because you always eat so much so quickly, but you never seem to really enjoy your food. But she said, now on this drug, you do actually look like you're tasting your food. And I realized for me, so much of my eating was about stuffing myself and the kind of calm I got from a sense of being stuffed. And you can't stuff yourself on these drugs because it radically slowed down my eating. I actually enjoy eating a fair bit more now. Right. I don't want to overstate it. I'm not become like a foodie, but my pleasure in food has actually gone up. But I'm unusual. I think there are more people who are describing losing pleasure in food than gaining pleasure in food, yeah.
This episode genuinely freaked me out. I didn't realise how bad this could potentially be for New Zealand. I think Ozempic is incredible for people that need it for their health, but the amount of people that are going to be able to access this, and it terrified me hearing Johann talking about the increase in eating disorders and the dangers around that for people, and especially young girls that are going to start jabbing themselves with this medication when they don't even need to. It's a wild... I honestly don't even know how to wrap up this episode because my mind is so blown by everything that we just heard. So I hope that you got something out of it as well. Next episode, we're going to be talking whether or not smut is the new porn.
I have never really been a big porn fan, and a lot of it just gets straight into it. And I think the build-up of a book far sexier, and they don't even need to be doing anything. Yeah. It's just like the relationship between the two characters.
I am so freaking excited about this episode. I'm going to have two of my besties, Ash and Ange, aka the queens of smutty books, to come on and talk about how smutty books are just changing their life and why they love them. Plus, I'm going to be talking to my friend Morgan Penn, who's a sexologist, to find out whether or not she thinks that smut is the new porn for women. And my husband Bryce will finally read some of my fairy porn to see if he realised how filthy it was. He did not.
Where are you reading this?
Everywhere. Sometimes in the car park outside Pilates. Catch you next week. Thank you so much for listening. I blimmin' appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful week.